I walked into my best friend's apartment to pick up a folder of documents and found him in bed with my girlfriend of 4 years. Our investor meeting was in 11 hours. That was 4 years ago. I'm writing this from a house I own in Victoria, British Columbia, looking out at a Douglas fir in the neighbor's yard that catches the afternoon light in a way that still makes me pause. When I'm working at the kitchen table, nobody in this city knows the version of me that drove out of Calgary at 6 in the morning with everything I owned in the back of a pickup truck. It's truck. My mother called last Thursday. I hadn't spoken to her in 2.5 years. She was crying before she finished saying my name. She said the money was gone, the house was in trouble, and could I please come home? I said I was home. Then I hung up. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Wyatt Mercer. I was 32 years old. My girlfriend and I had been together 4 years. My best friend and I had been close since we were 17. We met on a construction site where we both had summer jobs between semesters. He was studying business at the U of C. I was in civil engineering. We became the kind of friends who are assumed to be brothers by anyone meeting us, for the first time, who know each other's parents by first name, who text each other during hockey games, without preamble. After graduation, I went into project management at a commercial construction firm in Calgary. My best friend went into real estate sales, then brokerage. 3 years before everything ended, we started drawing up a plan. A small property renovation company. 50-50, built on my construction knowledge and his sales and market connections. We called it Summit Builds. I had a black Moleskine notebook, bought at the airport on a work trip, filled with projections, floor plans, contractor contacts, and a 5-year roadmap I'd sketched out over a dozen late nights at his kitchen table. By the time everything ended, we had one investor ready to commit $180,000. The meeting was the next morning. The letter of intent had to be submitted by 9 a.m. My girlfriend knew my best friend through work. She was a property lawyer. He was an early client. She introduced herself to me at his housewarming in 2019. 4 years later, she had a key to my apartment, joined my parents at Christmas dinner, and had a standing Tuesday night table at a Vietnamese place on 17th Avenue that I'd been going to since I moved to Calgary. I loved her. I was certain she loved me. The night it ended, I got a call at 7 p.m. from our investor's assistant. A small correction was needed on the LOI, a liability document had to be reprinted and initialed before the morning meeting. My best friend had the original at his apartment because he'd been handling the paperwork side. I had a spare key because we used his place as our unofficial office. It would take 5 minutes. I texted him that I was coming. He didn't respond. I assumed he was in the shower or had his phone on silent. We were comfortable enough that I didn't think to wait. I let myself in at 7:45. The front entry was dark. I could hear something from the bedroom. The particular kind of quiet that isn't really quiet once you're listening for it. I opened the bedroom door. I'm not going to describe what I saw in detail. I saw enough in about 4 seconds to understand everything. Who was there, what was happening, what it meant for every assumption I had built my life around. My girlfriend said my name, once. Just my name, like a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. My best friend said nothing, at all. I stood there for 4 seconds. I counted them later, sitting alone in a parking lot. Then I looked across the room. The folder with the LOI was on the desk by the window. I walked over, picked it up, tucked it under my arm, walked out. I drove to a Tim Hortons on McLeod Trail. Ordered a coffee I didn't drink. Sat in the parking lot for 2 hours, while my phone lit up on the passenger seat. 11 calls from my girlfriend, 6 from my best friend, 2 from my mother, which meant he had already called my parents. He had found the time, within 15 minutes of me walking out, to manage his story with my family, while I was sitting alone under fluorescent lighting staring at a paper cup. I opened one text from him, sent at 8:12. He said, "Wyatt, it's not what you think. Please don't do anything with the investor. We can talk. Please. Please don't do anything with the investor."
No.
Not I'm sorry. Not I know what I did. Not even my name with any weight behind it. Please don't do anything with the investor.
No.
I opened one text from my mother, sent at 8:34. She said, "Your best friend called us. He told us what happened. We're devastated. But please don't do anything rash with the business. He's been like a son to us for 15 years. People make terrible mistakes. This doesn't have to end everything. He's been like a son to us." I turned off my phone. Drove to a motel near Deerfoot Trail. $80 a night, paid cash. Sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the folder on the nightstand. And thought about the investor meeting in 13 hours. And the 3 years I had spent building toward what it represented. Then I thought about the phrase please. Don't do anything with the investor again. At 6 a.m. I called one person. A colleague from work named Rupert, not a close friend, just the kind of steady solid person who shows up when it counts. He answered on the second ring. I explained the situation in 90 seconds flat. He said, "What do you need?" That question. Not "Are you sure about what you saw?" Not "Maybe there's an explanation." What do you need? I said, "Go to my apartment and pack a bag. I'll text you what I need." He said, "Give me an hour." I made 3 calls before 7 a.m. first to my bank. I moved my half of the joint business account to my personal account, before my best friend thought to do the same. $38,000. 2.5 years of pooled savings. I left his half untouched. Second call to a business lawyer named Holt, who I'd met at an industry event and kept in my contacts, because he struck me as the kind of person you want on your side. Not against you. Left a voicemail saying I needed to exit a business partnership and I wanted to do it correctly. Third call to our investor's assistant. I said there was an internal partnership dispute. The morning meeting needed to be postponed indefinitely, and I would be in contact as an independent operator within the week. Summit builds, never launched. Rupert arrived at noon with a duffel bag, my laptop, and my personal documents folder from the home office. SIN card, banking records, the things that matter when you're starting from zero. He looked around the motel room. He said, "This is rough." I said, It's day 1. He said, "He's already calling people, saying you walked out of the partnership without explanation." I said, "Let him say it." He said, "What's the plan?" I said, "I leave." He said, "Calgary?" I said, "The province." I drove out of Calgary the next morning. Everything I owned fit in the truck bed and the back seat. Clothes, tools, laptop, documents, my grandfather's carving knife, and the Moleskine notebook. I brought the notebook not out of sentiment. Every idea in it was mine. I wasn't leaving it behind. I chose Victoria because I had been there once for a work conference and remembered standing at the harbor, thinking it was the kind of city was set where a person could start over without making a production of it. Nobody I knew lived there. No shared history. No version of me that anyone expected me to maintain. I arrived on a Tuesday. Rented a room in a house share near Fernwood. $650 a month, shared kitchen, 2 other tenants who worked in the trades and asked no questions. The kind of living situation that feels humiliating at 32, and clarifying at the same time. 3 weeks in, I picked up work through a general contractor named Graydon, who needed a site supervisor for a residential build in Saanich. $28 an hour. It's less than half my Calgary salary. I didn't care. The work was physical and specific and left me no room to think too hard before sunrise. 6 weeks after I left, my mother found my new number. I had changed it twice. She called on a Wednesday evening. She said, "Wyatt, we've been looking everywhere. You can't just disappear." I said I didn't disappear. I moved. She said, "He's devastated. He calls us every week. He made a terrible mistake, a catastrophic mistake, but he's been like family for 15 years. You can't erase that over one night." I said, "He was in bed with my girlfriend the night before our investor meeting. His first move was to call you, not to apologize to me. He managed your opinion of the situation before he had even tried with mine. That's not a mistake, that's a calculation." She went quiet. "Same." I said, "The night it happened, your first text to me was about the business. About not doing anything rash, not whether I was okay." She said, "We panicked, we said the wrong things. But we've known him since he was 17 years old." I said, "So have I. Apparently that means something different to each of us." My father got on the line. He said, "Son, this doesn't have to end everything. Come home. We'll sit down together, all of us." I said, "There's nothing to sit down about. My girlfriend is at my apartment. My business partner gutted the partnership. My parents texted me about an investor meeting, before they asked if I was okay. I'm in Victoria, I have work. Don't call this number again." He called twice more. Then I changed the number. 4th person to get the new one. Rupert, Holt the lawyer, Graydon, and my landlord. That was my entire world for a while, and it was enough. Month 4, Graydon brought me in as crew lead on a renovation flip he was running in Esquimalt. He had the property, I had $22,000 in savings. We went in together on materials. I did the supervision and most of the skilled labor. So we sold the unit 6 months later and I cleared $18,000 in profit. While I was framing walls in Victoria, Rupert was tracking things back in Calgary. He kept me updated. Not because I asked. Because he's the kind of person who believes you have a right to know the truth whether you think you want it or not. Month 3. My former best friend had gone back to the investor alone. Pitched Summit Builds as a solo venture, under a different name. Secured $75,000 in funding and moved forward without me. I took a long walk along Dallas Road, and came back and opened my laptop, and started incorporating a company in my name alone. I called it Mercer Property Group. Month 6. Rupert texted to say my former best friend and my former girlfriend were together. She had moved her things into his apartment. My parents had them both over for dinner. Rupert mentioned my mother had kept a place set at the table for me, with small vase of flowers where I used to sit. Like I was gone, like I had died instead of just driven west. Month 9, the investor pulled out. There had been disagreements about timelines. Deadlines missed. The $75,000 was gone, spent on permits and materials for a property that stalled mid-renovation. My former best friend owed the investor a partial repayment and had nothing liquid. Month 11. Rupert texted. Your parents lent him $30,000 to cover the investor dispute. Your dad said he needed a bridge, and they didn't want to watch him lose everything. $30,000. I read that sitting in my work truck outside a job site in Colwood. I sat without moving for about 20 minutes. My parents' retirement savings. Given to a man who had been sleeping with my girlfriend, and whom my mother had called devastating before she'd thought to ask if I was eating. Year 2. Graydon and I did a second flip together. I cleared $26,000 in profit. My first independent project through Mercer Property Group. A 2-bedroom in Langford I bought at auction for $310,000. Renovated over 5 months. Sold for $420,000. After costs, $72,000 clear. Year 2 from Rupert. The Calgary renovation sold at a loss after sitting on the market 9 months. My former best friend owed his contractor $44,000 in unpaid invoices. My parents took out a HELOC on their house, $45,000, to help him cover it. Their house, for him. Year 3. Mercer Property Group had 4 employees. Revenue, $680,000. I bought my own place, a 3-bedroom in Saanich, for $690,000. Put $110,000 down, 15-year mortgage at 4.8%. Year 3 from Rupert. My former best friend and my former girlfriend separated. She moved back to Edmonton. He said she had been telling people the relationship was nothing like she expected. That he was unreliable. That the person she thought she'd chosen wasn't who she'd actually gotten. 22 months. That's how long it lasted. The affair, the partnership, the borrowed glamour of it. The qualities that make someone feel thrilling in the beginning are the same ones that make them impossible to build anything with. No follow-through. No discipline. Nothing that survives a single hard winter. Year 4 revenue $1.1 million. 6 employees. I met someone at a fundraiser for a local housing nonprofit. She was on the organizing committee. Background in urban planning, a dry sense of humor, the kind of person who listens the way most people only pretend to. First person in 4 years who made me feel like more than just a function. We went for coffee the next day. She asked me what I was building in Victoria. I said, houses, mostly. She said, what else? Nobody had asked me what else in 4 years. I told her everything. The apartment, the folder on the desk, the drive to the Tim Hortons on Macleod, the motel, the Rockies somewhere past Revelstoke, the truck loaded to the roof, the moleskine on the passenger seat the whole way. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, you took the notebook. I said, those were my ideas. She said they were, and you built them anyway. A pause. You doing okay with all of it now? I said, most days. We've been together 14 months. She is the opposite of every choice I made in the life I left behind. Year 4, from Rupert. My former best friend was living at my parents' house. Evicted from his apartment after missed rent. Doing casual tile work. Something he'd always thought was beneath him. My parents' HELOC had added about $800 a month to their expenses. My father was 63. My mother worked part-time at the school board. Their combined income sat around $4,000 a month. The mortgage, the HELOC, and the cost of propping up a grown man who contributed almost nothing, was pushing them past $6,000 in monthly outgoings. My mother reached out through a cousin that year. Asked her to pass along a message saying she was sorry. And that she and my father needed to talk. I texted the cousin back, tell her I know about the HELOC, I've known for 2 years. When things stabilize, I'll reach out. They didn't stabilize. Year 5, last month. Rupert sent me the longest message he'd ever written. My parents were months from losing the house. My father had cashed $22,000 from his RRSP, taken the tax hit, paid the penalty, to cover 3 months of payments. It was gone. A foreclosure notice had been filed. My former best friend was still in the house, contributing $400 a month. The rest of his income going to his phone and his car. 3 days after Rupert's message, my mother called. I answered because I was curious what 4 years of consequences sounded like. She said, Wyatt, please don't hang up. I said, talk. She told me about the house, the HELOC, the RRSP, the foreclosure notice. She told me everything I already knew, in the voice of someone who had needed 4 years to get there. I said, I know. Rupert has told me everything. I knew about the $30,000 the month you lent it. I knew about the HELOC when you took it out. I knew when Dad cashed the RRSP. Silence. I said. You gave $30,000 of your retirement savings to a man who was sleeping with my girlfriend. You mortgaged your house to cover his contractor debt. You let him live in the spare room for 2 years while the house went into foreclosure around him. You made those choices freely, every single one of them. She said, we made terrible mistakes, we know that now, but we need your help. You've always been the one who knew how to fix things. I said I was. And the night I needed fixing, your first text to me was about the investor meeting. She didn't have an answer for that. I said, you chose him. You chose him that first night when you texted me about the business. You chose him when you lent the money. You chose him when you took the HELOC. You chose him when you let him move in and contributed nothing while you went broke around him. I am not going to undo those choices for you. She was crying. She said, he's been here 2 years. We don't know how to ask him to leave. We feel responsible for him. I said, the answer to that is the same answer you need for the house. You know what it is. You've always known. She said, what about your father? He's 63, he has nothing left. I sat with that question for a long time, long enough that she said my name, just to check I was still on the line. I said, Dad made his choices with his own hands and his own account numbers. Nobody forced him. He gave his retirement savings to someone who had destroyed his son's life. Not once but over 4 consecutive years. I have grieved that, I am finished grieving it. She said, are you really going to let us lose the house? I said, Mom. 4 years ago I drove out of Calgary in a pickup, $38,000, a duffel bag, and a notebook. I slept in a room share in Fernwood for $450 a month, less than what Marshall costs you. I earned $28 an hour. I built a company from a borrowed desk in a contractor's office. Nobody called to check on me. Nobody chose me. I chose myself because the people who were supposed to didn't. Long silence. I said, sell the house before the bank takes it. Walk away with whatever equity remains. Tell him he has 60 days to find another place to live. That's what I did 4 years ago, with 12 hours notice and a lot less runway than you have now. She said, will you come home even just for the sale? I said, no. She said, will we ever see you again? The silence stretched longer than I expected from myself. I said, I don't know, Mom, I honestly don't know. She called back twice that evening. I didn't answer. My father called the next morning from a number I didn't recognize, which is how we got through. He said he was sorry. Said he knew that didn't fix anything. Said he understood. Now, what he had done and not done. I said, I believe you, Dad. He said, then come home. I said, I am home. He said, that's what you always say. I said, because it's always been true. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I chose wrong. Every time for 4 years I chose wrong. I know that. I'm 63 years old and I have nothing left, and it's because I chose wrong. I'm asking you man to man. Help us through this. I said, sell the house, give him a deadline. Start over in something you can actually afford. That's the path through it. It's not easy and it's not comfortable. It's the same path I walked. You built a life once from less than you have now. So did I. So can you. He didn't argue. After a moment he said, will you be there at the end of it? I said, I don't know. He said, that's an honest answer. I hung up. Or he did. I don't remember which of us ended it. Just that the line went quiet, and I was sitting on the back deck of my house in Saanich, watching the light shift through the neighbor's Douglas fir. She came outside, 10 minutes later, looked at me, and didn't ask what had happened. Just sat down and set her mug on the railing, and looked at the tree. After a while she said, you okay? I said, my dad cried. First time I've ever heard that. She said, that's hard. I said, yeah. She said, you don't owe them anything, you know that. I said, I know, but knowing and feeling are different rooms in the same house. Tonight I'm in the wrong one. She put her hand on my arm. We stayed there until the light changed. The house is listed now. Rupert says they expect to clear about $40,000 after the mortgage and HELOC balances are settled. 31 years in that house, and they'll walk out with $40,000 because everything else. The RRSP, the savings, the equity, went to a man who has been sleeping in the spare room, contributing $400 a month while the walls came down around him. My former best friend moved out 2 weeks before the listing. He's in a bachelor suite in the northeast end of the city, doing subcontract tile work, sending money toward old debts. The property mogul plan lasted about 14 months in total. The affair, the company, the borrowed confidence. 14 months before the reality ate through the fantasy. The same way it always does. With people who are built for beginnings and nothing else. My former girlfriend is back in Edmonton, at a firm, Starting over at 34 in the city she grew up in. She traded something stable for something that felt exciting. And she ended up in her childhood bedroom the same as him. The qualities that made it feel thrilling are the exact same qualities that make a person impossible to build a life alongside. No follow-through, no discipline. Nothing that holds past the first hard season. And me. I'm in Victoria. 1.1 million in revenue last year. 7 employees now. With 2 more conversations ongoing. A house I own outright except for a mortgage I am paying down ahead of schedule. A woman who asked me what I was building and actually waited for the real answer. A life assembled from a motel off Deerfoot Trail, a notebook with creased pages, and $38,000 moved to my account at 6 in the morning. On the worst day I have ever had. That notebook is still in my desk drawer. I haven't opened it in about a year. Everything in it already exists. In a different province and under my name alone. My mother said everything fell apart. She's not wrong. But what fell apart was always hollow. A friendship that was mostly performance. A partnership built on someone else's willingness to take from me. A family pattern of choosing the most destructive option available and calling it loyalty. That was always going to collapse. I just didn't have the information to see it yet. What didn't fall apart is what I built on my own. In a city where nobody knew me, with no runway and no safety net. And a truck that needed an oil change somewhere past Revelstoke. I was the one they called reliable. The one who showed up. The one who built things that lasted. And when it mattered most, they asked me to be fine with what had been done to me. So I chose myself. Drove west through the mountains until the prairies were behind me. Built something from nothing. And when the phone rang 4 years later, I already knew exactly what I was going to say. Not because I'm cruel. Because I'm precisely what I was raised to be. The one who doesn't throw good money after bad. The one who knows when a foundation is too far gone to build on. The one who walks away from a site that can't be saved and breaks ground somewhere new. Zone 2. Some things can't be fixed. Some partnerships were never what they appeared to be. And some people drive west until the mountains open up around them. And they realize they've already arrived somewhere better. That's where I am. And I have never built anything stronger. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you found something in this story that stayed with you, please like, share and subscribe to the Family Vault. We'll see you in the next one.